All right, and in theory, we are live. Let me cut to a camera that actually shows me, and we'll take it from there. Hey guys, this is Peter Bickford. I'm the creator of ComicBase, and we're trying our first ever live stream. I've wanted to do something like this for a really long time. It's always weird because, like, on one hand, I'm always spending my days like just heads down, programming and working on different things that you want to have happen in the program. And anytime that I always want to talk to you guys a lot, but at the same time, I'm like making newsletters or doing things like that. I always feel like, oh man, I should be like working on the program. So I'm trying to find a way that we can talk to each other and do it in kind of like real time. Kind of like we're just sitting around talking like at a convention or Comic-Con or something like that, and where I'm not having to prep the material so much. That's the idea behind this whole live stream idea. It's also something that we try to do at Comic-Con, and if you've ever seen the communications inside the San Diego Convention Center, you will know why that was an absolute impossibility. We've been out there. I've been to the San Diego Comic Con for like 22 years or something like that, and it's basically a concrete bunker with 150,000 people's cell phones hitting it at the same time, and you're lucky to get a phone call down there. So I'm sitting here right now in my lovely home in Franklin, Tennessee. We're just outside of Nashville. This is my office. This is the real thing. And I'm just trying to, I'm chatting with you with a video cam setup over my phone, and I hope this works. So I see people's comments are coming in. This is neat. Let me do a quick look over here and see. I don't know how people do this live stream thing. It's like you have to watch 6 things at once, but here we go. Investment in comics. I just want to take through the adventure of the 2020 ComicBase. All right. Let's get to it. All right, so if this works, I should be able to flip over here, and you should see my screen. So here we are. This is those are actually some comics I just sold today on Atomic Avenue. So we bought all my Where Monster Dwells second series. Anyway, so ComicBase 2020. Let me give you a little backstory on this one. I'm gonna flip back to me for a second, just so I feel like I'm emoting to somebody. We started doing ComicBase in 1992. It was, if you guys have ever looked at ComicBase inside ComicBase, it actually has its own entry, and so it kind of gives you the backstory of the whole program. But the whole deal was, I was getting ready to get married to my wife, my fiance at the time, Carolyn, and I, like a lot of you, had a bunch of comic books, and I thought, well, geez, I live in a little apartment in Fremont, California. Who's going to be able to, move in here, if I don't get rid of some of these things? And so my plan, I had about 6,000 comic books at the time, was I was going to go and, it was the 90s. It was a different era. You could actually take a computer, put something on it, and everyone would just flock over to it and say, well, maybe this is a game. I will look at this, and we'll see if it, if it's something neat. So I was working at Apple, at the time, and my plan, such as it was, is I was going to go and make a little multimedia database to show off my comic collection. And that way, if people want to know, well, hey, do you have the first appearance of Nick Fury or something like that? It would be like, oh yeah, Strange Tales 135. And by the way, I actually had that comic. It's right here, and that'll be, $18 or whatever it was at the time, and I would sell a lot of comic books. So that was my plan. And we would then get up in the morning, we would, load just dozens and dozens of comic boxes into our car, shuttle them over to the LeBaron Hotel in San Jose, set up for the show, do the show all day. People would come over, look at the computer, look at the comics. I'd sell, a bunch of comic books. I'd come back a couple boxes later. We'd unload them all into my whole thing, put them all back in my apartment, and we'd repeat the process. And as we're sitting there on about like the second or third time doing this, and our backs, we're 20s, and our backs are just aching because we just loaded thousands of pounds worth of comic books, hither and yon. The plan is working, but it's working really slowly. It occurs to us as we're nursing our backs there that comic books are really light, are really heavy, and the ones we had didn't sell for much, and software is really light. And you could sell it for a bit more. And so we thought, well, what if we took this multimedia database that people seem to be asking us about and turned it into a product? And that became ComicBase about a year later, after we just sat down and buckled down on it. So anyway, that's 1992 is when we shipped our first copy of ComicBase. And we were working on a program called Visual Basic at the time. It was called VB98, and the 98 stood for the year of Visual Basic that was. So anyway, we're still on VB98 like 20 years later, because .NET was the new version of Windows that had come out, or Windows development software that came out after that. And, for the first several years of .NET's development, the value proposition was, well, okay, if you develop on this new thing, you'll have to rewrite the program largely from scratch, and it'll be buggier and slower, but it'll be a better architecture. And we were like, we're going to hold off and see if this .NET thing sticks around. And because, Microsoft had done a number of other things over the years, and they didn't always stick. So we thought, okay, well, what we'll do instead is kind of cram as much stuff as we can to this old version, just keep on going with it until, and look for a way to move to the new thing. So .NET did stick, and over the years, even though we managed to get a lot of stuff into VB98 type stuff using the Jet database engine, is the same database engine that Microsoft Access is based on. That was what the comp-based architecture. Even though we managed to keep that going for a really long time, it became clearer after a decade or so that this was going to be a problem for us. So we kept on looking into what's it going to take to rewrite this for .NET and maybe a better database. And the answer was it's going to take several years of work and hundreds of thousands of lines of code. And we're like, that's going to take some doing. And so one of the ways we actually got some of the work done is we actually built Sidekick ahead of time, because it gave us an excuse to write large portions of the ComicBase code base in .NET ahead of time and do some of the trickier things. But then it came time, a couple, 3-4 years ago, where we really had to buckle down and say, look, we're really getting to the end of the road on the old architecture. We can't push it any further. It's starting to hit maximum database sizes a lot. It was really starting to kind of come apart on us. And we thought, we've really got to buckle down and just all we do is just write to get the new version out. So ComicBase 2020 came out last year around Thanksgiving. It was over 300,000 lines of code. It was like 4 years of my life. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to tell you how many late nights that was. But we got it out, and I'm pretty happy about it, because the main things that we did about it is we rewrote the entire program from scratch, as well as, at that point, the reporting engines, all the mobile stuff that had not come out over the years, all the back-end stuff, all the, when you're posting things to Atomic Avenue, when you're posting your items for sale, that all had to be rewritten. I mean, just basically everything had to be done. But when we did do it all, we had a chance to say, well, if we were doing it all over again, because we were, what would we do differently? And we did a lot of things differently. One of the big things we did is we said, ComicBase isn't just, we're starting to have a lot of things work their way into the database that we don't really want to not put in, but they're not really comic books. So things like, Comic Shop News or Comics Buyer's Guide or Wizard Magazine or books about comic books or art books or things like that. They're not really comic books, and we don't want to not let, they're part of people's collections. We won't let them track them, but we also want to let them do their thing on their own. And we also thought, well, if we start tracking things other than comic books, like, say, books and magazines, those things could grow into a thing in their own right. And so we have folks who, with really large Saturday Evening Post collections that finally have got a program that manages that. Or, book collections, which just because right now we have a lot of books about comic books doesn't mean you couldn't put your rare first editions of Huckleberry Finn in there, too. So we're kind of opening the door to have lots of new things come into the database. So that was one big thing we did. It's also easily the least interesting thing for most of our current customers. The most interesting thing for most of our current customers is we switched the database engine. We were, as I said, in a thing called Jet. It's the same database engine that Access is built on, and it has one big problem with it. It's a pretty good database. It's built into Windows at this point. It's reasonably fast, but its biggest problem, and this is a really big problem at this point, is it's limited to 2 gigabytes file sizes. And over the years, we've actually added so much stuff to ComicBase that we were regularly pushing that 2 gigabyte limit. Typically what you guys would see is the database, when it was all compacted, would be about 1.1 gigabytes in size, and then you download the week's update. Now the way updates work is you actually download a copy of everything that's on our master database for the issues. It puts it into your database and kind of compares them side by side, and it says, well, okay, this is some stuff that it's new. These are some things that are deleted, and it kind of puts reconciles the two together, and then it throws away all the temporary stuff that it loaded in. But during the time it's working, your database was at about 1.6, 1.7 gigs. And then there's this weird behavior that databases have, is when they make changes, they actually stack the new stuff to the end of the database, and then they have to incorporate it later using this process called compacting. Anyway, the long and the short is we'd regularly bump into that 2 gig file size limit. We'd have to stop everything while we ran this compacting process. What compacting really means is go through all your database and write a clean copy with nothing but the new, don't have the changes there. Just write all the new stuff in as one. It would take several minutes. Depending on your machine, it might take a really long time, and that got really, really old. So anyway, the new database we moved to is a thing called SQLite. SQLite is an open source database, super fast. It's super, as they say, lightweight. But another thing that's really great about it is it doesn't have that file size limit. Matter of fact, one thing that's really great about it is it's so fast on doing things like text searches that we didn't need to build these massive indexes that we used to have for all the artists and writers. We can actually compute them on the fly. And so your database, when you move over to ComicBase 2020, is actually several hundred megs smaller than it was even in ComicBase 2017. So, and then even if you ever did somehow add, I don't know, 1 trillion records to the whole thing, you would never hit a file size limit where we'd have to say, oh, stop everything, we have to compact. So literally, if I always used to tell people, if the only thing I said that ComicBase 2020 does is not need to compact, that would be enough. But we did some other things as well. We redesigned the interface. Let me switch back to the camera to the actual program now. So we redesigned the interface now. And as you say, we can go do books, do magazines, and so forth. But we also said, look, of all the things people have asked for over the years, what can we do to make this cooler? And so we did a lot of things involving, say, for instance, how you view your comics. So right now, it's a little pale on mine. It's hard to see the green stripes where people have their issues in stock. But let's say I want to go and well, first of all, I can do things like saying, let's view this not as a grid. I want to view it as just an album. I want to see it, just as thumbnails for the covers themselves. Sometimes, if I'm a visual guy, this is like a nicer way to me to look at my comics. So I can give you different ways of looking at it. I also can say things like, hey, I don't want to see the comics I don't have. So, for instance, variations have gotten to, variations. We did some work on this back. There's a guy, a reporter for Medium, asked us to do. He was writing a piece on comics. And he asked us to do a thing on the explosion of variants. And we found out that over time, something like, back in the 1960s, there was only something like 3 variants published during the entire decade, at least as variants on purpose. And then in the 70s, it got to be more. In the 80s, it got to be more. By the time that, the 90s rolled around, they were getting to be a real thing. But then they would explode every decade after that, to the point when, and I think this is 2015, we found out that something like 65% of all the comics being solicited by Diamond every month were a variant of one set or another. So these things went from being like a rare thing in your collection to being the usual thing. The problem is not everyone collects variants, and if you do, maybe I don't want to see all the variants there are of an issue. So we added something here where we say, for instance, I only want to see the items that I've got. So here's all the items that I actually have in stock for Where Monsters Dwell. Or I could say things like, only show me the regular issues of this series. So in other words, I don't have book 1, and it would bother me, that I maybe didn't have the collection, or it would bother me if I didn't have issue number 0. But it doesn't bother me, and let's go ahead and show them all now, that I don't have variant A of issue number 1. So we've got different ways of filtering your collection now, and so you can do all these things in the grid view as well. So let's go ahead and just do the same thing. Just say, here's all my owned items. So we did a lot of things involving that, and also you can say things like, say, do or don't show the value graph. Other things we did in this new version, we centralized the find. It used to be if you wanted to go and look at anything, you'd have to go to another screen, say, find whatever else. And now I can actually just type things like, I don't know, let's look for like Fang Foom, which best monster name ever, by the way. So yes, and Marvel apparently did not 1 but 3 titles involving Fang Foom. Oh, and by the way, we also did some nicer browsing things where, as you're browsing down lists and stuff, we will do searches within the thing. However it goes, we'll show you little previews of where you're going, and so forth. We got a chance to really, rev a lot of this stuff to make it, kind of neater. And I'm going to switch back to showing all items because I do not own Marvel Monsters Fang Foom. Other things people have noticed is if you had the old version, maybe you're used to seeing a lot of information here, left and right. But one thing we realized is we are tracking so much information about comic books at this point that we don't really, it's more than most people need most of the time. Most of the time it's just in the way. So we added a columns to view over here, which I guess is over on my other monitor. Let me bring it over here, where I can say things like, all right, look, I want to, I can want to say, these are the columns I want to see in any given issue. And as you see, there's a lot I could be showing, and I don't necessarily want to see them all. But you can check off the ones you want to see. You can move them up and down to rearrange which order they're in. And you can have them be different for the different collectibles. So maybe I want to see different fields for books than I do for magazines or whatever else. And also there's a couple presets here, like if I'm doing heavy data entry or if I want to see my custom fields or whatever else. But this is a great way of just sort of customizing the view so it looks like what you want and not just like us guessing how you might want to make it. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm sure we'll hit a lot of it as we go. I'll try to hit more, later on. Let me check other comments here. George Rear says, any plans for a cloud version? Great question. So one thing we've got going on with ComicBase is, so if you're like an IT geek, let me flip back to myself here so I can see myself talking. If you're like an IT geek, ComicBase is, they would call it a thick client. That's tech speak for saying, look, it lives on your machine. It's really your data when you're using it, but we do a lot with the cloud. I mean, in other words, there's a lot of stuff you might have seen, for instance, when I click on this over, let me click over here. When I click over, on an issue, it immediately figured, all right, here's all the copies that are available for sale of this one, and here's how its price has been charting over the last 4 years. Here's the copies I can buy it from $4.46 to $9.99 if I want to go. It has lots of little interactions like this that you can do just by using the program. The fact that you can get updates on a weekly basis is a fact that we're so integrated with the internet. And then obviously if you're using the Pro or the Archive versions, you've seen that it can automatically generate your reports for you. You can view your stuff online. You can add to it with a mobile app. All that stuff is driven by the servers. So why do I install anything at all on my machine? Two reasons, really. One of them is, on a philosophical basis, we didn't want to be those guys where you're renting your data from us. My theory is, like, your comic collection is yours. It's not mine. If I'm going to spend, dozens, hundreds, thousands sometimes of hours, logging all the stuff about my collection, if you're buying it from somebody who sells you on the cloud, the typical model of that is the second you stop paying us money, your data goes away, or at the very least you lose access to it. And that's just, I don't know, I'm an old school guy that way. It just strikes me as wrong. I just never wanted to be in that position. So your data is yours. It doesn't belong to anyone else. You don't need to share it with anyone else. But we want to be there so that when you do decide to share it, or I do say, hey, I want to save my stuff out up to the web, so I've got a backup, or I want to save it up to the web so I can get to my report from anywhere. We wanted to make it possible to do those sorts of things, but we didn't want to own your data. Now that comes with some downsides too. I mean, it means that you actually gotta pay attention to where your data is on your machine. You gotta make sure that if you wipe out your hard disk and you've never saved it anywhere, well, that's a problem. So that's a thing. I mean, it isn't. Both approaches have their strengths. But we did have kind of like that take where we really wanted you to own stuff. The other thing is, by not being a fully cloud versions, we're not bound to just whatever your web browser can do. So in other words, you can do lots and lots of things using ComicBase. Just how, for that matter, doing reporting. You'll notice cloud-based collections in general. Other than some canned web reports, typically you can't. I mean, try printing a label. It doesn't happen. But then things like just using a barcode scanner to zap into your comic books, adding graphics, doing things like that. There's a lot of power that comes from just being able to do things like on an actual desktop machine, and we want to make that as possible, as easy as possible. But anyway, great question, George. I'm glad you asked it because it comes up a lot. Let me see what else we got going on. Rather than local than cloud. Yeah, okay, cool. Gaps in pictures of pictures in different covers. Oh, hey, let me get to that one because this one it did come up. Some folks had gotten a hold of me earlier and asked, how do I do things like adding pictures? So let's see here. And I think it was Bruce who asked how do you add pictures. All right, so let's go ahead and let's go through how that goes. Let's find a title that we may or may not have something for. Let's go Hellblazer, Hellblade, Hell. I don't know, Hell something. The Hellblazer. Oh, come on, Hellblazer from Magic. Okay, these are looking very complete. Geez. All right. Has anyone got one that we don't have a lot of covers for? So I'm using the archive edition right now, and if you guys haven't heard, we're up to something like 650,000 comics now. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Okay, so all right, and let me switch back to the computer so you can see what we're doing. This whole have a switcher thing and switch to show the computer thing. It sounds great in theory, I just gotta remember to switch so I can show the computer to you every once in a while. Alright, oh good grief, really. Something something we don't have. Hellbound Lifestyle by Big Planet Retrofit Comics. Okay, I have no idea what this comic is. Anyway, but let's see how you would go about adding your own issue for this. So let me go ahead and pull up just a web browser here. All right, and let's see if anyone on the web's got one. So Hellbound Lifestyle. Anyone? Hey, what do you know? Okay, so somebody's got a picture of it. Alright, here's how, and I'm using this as an example. I'm not saying do this to other people's pages. I'm just I'm assuming that you really had your own copies of stuff and there's no copyright stuff involved. But let's say I wanted to add a picture for Hellbound Lifestyle, and I just happen to have one sitting around here. Whether, Amazon, don't get upset, I'm just demonstrating. Okay, so here's a ping over here you can see on my desktop of Hellbound Lifestyle. So what I'm going to do here, this is going to be for issue number 1. All I got to do, make sure that the name of my thing is 1, or if you have file extensions turned on, so you're seeing whether it's like a JPEG or a ping, 1.jpg or just 1 if you have it set so you're not showing those. But the real name is just going to be 1.jpg. Now all I got to do is drag it onto the title. You see how it changes to a little plus there? When I do that, boom. And two things just happened. One is it dragged the file in, and it made a copy in exactly the right place to find it, which, if I'm going to show where this is going to be in a picture folder deep inside my pictures folder hierarchy, which is like my users document, pictures B, Big Planet Retrofit Hellbound Lifestyle, and then number 1.jpg. You don't need to remember that whole stuff. It'll figure out the whole, where it gets filed automatically for you. You don't need to do anything extra, just drag it in, at which point you can, delete the original. It also made a little thumbnail icon over here, so that next time I go there, you'll notice it goes really fast to get to that one and show it. It just pops up immediately. One thing ComicBase does is the very first time you use it, it automatically goes and creates these little icons for everything so that it kind of caches them so that it goes fast next time. Let me go to a long title. I'll show how that works. So let's go to Blackhawk. Alright, you see how the very first time it kind of struggled there for a second, and if I get ahead of it, you see it's got these little bits right down here, and then they become the icons, it shows with the real pictures. But now, if I go ahead and I go to another title and I come back to it, bam, they're just sitting there. So that's just a little optimization there to make it so all these things load very quickly next time. Alright, what else do we have from the live stream here? And by the way, thank you so much for showing up on this whole thing. I gotta tell you guys, it's been a big project kicking this whole thing off, and I honestly terrified the idea of going live. I'm not really video guy. So I've been trying to get this going, and I can't believe you guys showed up as well as you did. I'm gonna try to do these every Wednesday at about this time. I hope this time works for some of y'all, and we'll have the we're gonna slice up the relevant how-tos and try to put them as tip videos, and also hopefully answer your questions as we go live. But thanks so much for showing up. I apologize for the short notice. Honestly, had I given myself much more notice, I'd have found some way of weaseling out of it, because the idea of like going live kind of, this is new to me, and new things can be a little frightening. All right, so let's see what else we got here. Since so many comics went to digital recently in the DRM, how do you show them and add it in ComicBase? Ooh, excellent question. That's from Rob. It actually works exactly the same way. As a matter of fact, there's some special stuff built in the program so that you can drop in like comic. Comic. Oh, somebody help me out in the live stream here. Comicology, thank you. Drafts, so that they you can literally just drag the URL onto your thing and it will show up as a media file. Let me show you something cool like that. Like let's add a movie trailer. So let's say Batman the movie, and let's find the YouTube clip on that. So let's go to YouTube. Let's go YouTube. Batman the movie, and because someone's got it, right? Batman 1989, right? Okay, great. So here is the movie trailer for the Tim Burton Batman movie. Let me once again switch back so you can see what I'm doing. Man, if I were good at this live streaming thing, you'd have been looking at this stuff the entire time. All right, so what I did, apologies, guys. So what I did here is I just went to YouTube. I picked up, I typed in Batman the movie, and I got a result here. And here's, here's our guy. There's, Jack Nicholson in all his glory, right? All right, so here's the video link right here. You see youtube.com/watch, etc. Grab that, drag it to your desktop. All right, it's going to make a little URL just like that. All right, now let's go in ComicBase and let's go to Batman the movies. The movies, I think it was called the motion picture, right? Motion, the Warner Brothers animated, Batman something. We'll throw in Batman the movies. What the hell? All right, so let's have a look in. Let's say book one. What we're going to add it as a video link right here. All right, you guys might have noticed this little icon at the far left here. It looks kind of looks like a little stylized play button. What you can do is this, same idea. Just take your clip, whatever it is, YouTube clip, whatever else, name it after what the thing is you're gonna do. And I'm just gonna call this one 1. And I believe if I did this right, because the URL ones are a little squirrely, so I might have screwed this up, but. If not, if I did, I'll post a correction. But drag it onto here. I didn't. It worked. Okay, so now you see that it grew a little play button right there. And again, the whole rule is just name it whatever the issue's named, and then suddenly I have a little thing here where if I click on it, it's going to launch my video, and I'm looking at the trailer. So you can do that for movies, you can do them for PDFs, you can do them for Comicology URLs, even if they're protected. You can do them for CBR files, CBZ files. There's about a dozen different file formats it'll recognize, and it'll pick them up, and you're good to go. Anyway, great question. Thanks for asking that. Let me get back here. Trying to get to... trying to manage way too many windows, guys. Let's see here. Let me close a few things because I'm getting confused. And I'm closing Slack. I'm actually working off of 2 monitors here, so bear with me. I'll flip back to myself so you can see the confusion on my face as I close things. Okay, give me just a second. ComicBase. Let's go back to my own... Nope, that's not it. Oh, this is nothing but professionalism. Okay. And, by the way, another thing that's pretty great over the break here... the break. Yeah, is that what we're doing? The break I don't know if you guys have seen, but Fender Guitars has been offering free lessons on guitar. So you can sign up for 3 months of their program for nothing. And if you guys are looking to ever play a guitar, you know, if there are worse things you could do is we're all stuck indoors during all this nonsense. Although apparently a lot of us are not as stuck indoors as we used to be, but so hopefully that will all be over soon. All right, so I'm looking at the time. Holy cow, time flew. So I think I'm going to start wrapping up at this point. But guys, thank you so much for doing this again. I'm going to try to do this again next Wednesday at this time, try to do something like a regular schedule. Guys, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you showing up, and let's do this again next time. Thank you so much.